So I wanted to make this video in response to Alex O'Connor's video on atheist morality and what he saw as some of the flaws to it. I actually want to begin by asserting something that I actually think is really good that he did, and that was to separate the difference between good and bad and obligation. Because questions of good and bad, those actually are questions of value. They aren't necessarily questions of morality. Morality is a little bit different. Morality is the combination of the concept of good and bad and the concept of obligation. You have to combine those two because in any instance that you're talking about morality, you're talking about something that someone has some sort of an obligation towards. It's one thing to say that something is good. It's another thing to say that you have some sort of an obligation to do that good thing or to not do that bad thing. The flaw in Alex's reasoning is the way that he approaches the idea of obligation. He approaches the idea of obligation from the perspective that obligation is some sort of a feeling or an instinct. And I don't think that that's an accurate way to think about it. I don't think it really gets to the heart of what the source of obligation is. And I want to talk a little bit about the source of moral obligation. So I'd like to build my argument step by step. The first premise is that the ought, or obligation, comes from having a purpose or an end in mind. To illustrate this point, all you have to do is think, can you create any sort of an obligation without having some kind of a purpose or end behind it? Here's a simple example. Let's say that you are in Los Angeles and you want to go to San Diego. That is your end or purpose that you have, is to go to San Diego. Well, now we can actually begin to say that you ought to do some things or you ought not to do some things. For instance, you probably ought to go south on the 5 freeway if you want to get to LA. Alice in Wonderland teaches this same lesson beautifully. In the story, Alice is lost and she finds the Cheshire Cat. She looks at the Cheshire Cat and she asks, "Which path should I take?" And the Cheshire Cat responds, "Well, that depends on where you want to go." The idea here is that if you don't have an end or a purpose that you're trying to reach, it doesn't matter where you go. There is no should or shouldn't because there is no end or purpose. The second premise that I'd like to propose is that purpose can only come from a mind. Again, you can just ask yourself, how can you have purpose without a mind? Purpose is something that we as conscious beings create. So there just doesn't exist a purpose or an end without a mind. The third premise is that an objective purpose must come from a mind outside of your own. This again seems rather self-evident. If I come up with a purpose, then it's no longer an objective purpose, it's a subjective purpose. It's the purpose that I created. It was my preference to go to San Diego. So in conclusion, when you take a look at these different premises, what you find is there's no such thing as an objective moral obligation for all of humanity unless there is a mind outside of humanity that has defined a purpose for all of humanity. The basic premise of most religions, and specifically Christianity, is that there exists a mind outside of humanity that has created a purpose for humanity. Now, you may reject that assumption. You may not think that that's a plausible idea at all. However, it does create, if the premises are indeed true, there is a framework there to where you can logically make the case that there are objective morals and obligations that are incumbent upon all people, no matter what, no matter when. Now, the atheist, on the other hand, has no real basis for objective morality because, quite frankly, they don't have a mind outside of humanity that has defined a purpose for humanity. So while being the creator of your own purpose in life may sound great, it does leave you without a framework for objective morality. Ultimately, I believe that the existence of objective morality is self-evident, and therefore, atheism just appears to be the weaker position. Thanks for watching this video. Until next time.